Despite what most people are taught, Germany is still a place of great mystery, and by that I mean the history and origins of the Germanic people. While some might not agree with that statement, satisfied with the state-funded education they received in school, I would argue that what passes for education today, especially history taught after World War II, is little more than politically motivated propaganda, half-truths, and in many cases, lies by omission. In today's episode, we'll examine another obscure story from 19th century Germany that, while factually true, does not seem to fit into our modern paradigm, and therefore remains unsolved. Lebus is a small town in eastern Germany, near Frankfurt, located on the west bank of the Oder River at the modern border with Poland. Settlement in the region has been traced as far back as 3,000 years, including Slavic tribes and the Lombards, a Germanic people who ruled most of the Italian peninsula from 568 to 774. Lombards, or Longbards, incidentally means long beards, and when you hear the ancient Germanic people described as barbarous, often in a derogatory way, implying unsophisticated, keep in mind that barbar means beard, and Rus means red. So this is a misconception from a Roman perspective, by a civilization that shaved, and had a different set of morals and values. The Germanic tribes descend from an ancient spiritual tradition that equated long hair, including beards, with a vow of chastity, morality, and integrity, rather than a lack of sophistication or being uncivilized. To illustrate this point, I'll read a short excerpt written by Julius Caesar at around 50 BC, and I quote, "The Germans differ much from these usages, for they have neither druids to preside over sacred offices, nor do they pay great regard to sacrifices. They rank in the number of the gods those alone whom they behold, and by whose instrumentality they are obviously benefited, namely the sun, fire, and the moon. They have not heard of the other deities. It is even by report their whole life is occupied in hunting and in the pursuits of military art from childhood. They devote themselves to fatigue and hardships. Those who have remained chaste for the longest time receive the greatest commendation amongst their people. They think by this the growth is promoted, by this the physical powers are increased, and the tendons are strengthened, and to have had a knowledge of a woman before the 20th year, they reckon among the most disgraceful acts, of which matter there is no concealment, because they bathe promiscuously in the rivers, and only use skins or small cloaks of deer hides, a large portion of the body being in consequence naked." End quote. So where the Greek or Roman lifestyle was based in part on slavery and the celebration of pedophilia and child sacrifice, the ancient Germanic tribes valued self-discipline and a certain moral fiber which they believed they would transmute into greater physical prowess, higher intelligence, and an increased spiritual awareness or psychic aptitude. That said, I'd like to stress that in this context, chastity did not mean total abstinence, but a certain degree of self-restraint, which I cover in my other videos on esoteric transmutation, biomagnetic energy, or what I commonly refer to as vril, for those that are interested in learning more on that. Now back to our story, and Lebus, Germany, where in September of 1850, a mysterious stranger was found wandering around the town, seemingly lost, and speaking a broken form of German. Confronted by the authorities, he did not appear to be able to speak or understand any of the European languages, except for his imperfect form of German, but he claimed to read and write what he called Laxarian and Abramian tongues. The Abramian language he declared to be the written language of the clerical order in Laxaria, and the other the common language of his people. After further questioning, he said his religion seemed in part to resemble Christianity, in form, symbol, and doctrine, but that it was called Vespasian. He said his name was Jofar Vorin, described as having all marks of Caucasian origin, and he claimed to have come from a country called Laxaria, situated in a portion of the world called Sacria. He said that Laxaria was many hundreds of miles away and was separated by vast oceans from the land upon which he currently stood, which was Europe. He followed up by describing 5 great areas of the earth, possibly continents, that he named as Sakarya, Aflar, Astar, Oslar, and Uplar. His purpose in coming to Europe, he alleged, was to seek a long-lost brother, but he suffered a shipwreck on the voyage. He did not know where the wreck occurred, nor how he arrived in Germany, and he could not trace his route on shore on any map or globe. As the chief magistrate was moved by the great level of geographical knowledge the man was able to provide, and not having the means by which to evaluate him any further, Jofar Vorin was then taken to Berlin, where it was reported that more questioning and research would be completed. John Timms wrote about Vorin in his 1852 Yearbook of Facts in Science and Art, a periodical which was praised for its accuracy by other publications of the time. In his reporting, he laid out the information that Vorin had provided and claimed that the man was still the subject of much scientific and curious gossip in the Prussian capital. One of the most argued explanations for Vorin was that he was something of a time or dimension traveler who had inadvertently landed in a world that was not of his own. Others worried that he was suffering from a disorder or an unknown mental condition that made it difficult to be understood. Some speculated that he was an imposter, but unable to state a motive, as he was not claiming to be of an affluent background, nor was he asking for any financial assistance. Strangely, the historical record of what happened to Jofar Vorin ended in Berlin as inexplicably as it began. Whoever he was, Vorin's tale is sometimes used as evidence for teleportation, parallel universes, and alternate realities. That said, there's another, though equally bizarre, explanation. Laxaria, the country which Vorin claimed citizenship, is Latin for luxury, which brings to mind other fanciful stories of a hidden world of milk and honey beyond the poles of the earth. The novel A Voyage to the Inner Earth, also published as The Smoky God, was first published in 1908 and presented as a true account of Olaf Jansen, a Norwegian sailor who, along with his son, discovered a northern entrance to the Earth's interior. They allegedly lived inside unimaginably gigantic caverns deep inside the Earth for 2 magnificent years, as guests of a very tall but European-looking inhabitants of the underground network of subterranean colonies, or cities, whose capital was said to be the original Garden of Eden, and had everything one would imagine from a place regarded as a biblical paradise, a beautiful, protected oasis deep under the crust, with flowing rivers, full of oxygen-producing algae, plenty of fruit trees, and a soft, diffuse glow of light from bioluminescent vegetation and mushrooms that kept the massive caverns perpetually lit and providing a plausible ecosystem underground without the need for direct sunlight. This idea of a subterranean kingdom is echoed in many parts of the world, from Tibet to India, with names such as Agartha or Shambhala, but also appear again in Germany in the 1700s, predating both Olaf Jansen's voyage and the mysterious appearance of Jofar Vorin. Let us now revisit a brief excerpt from a prior video I did on the subject, which includes a very unusual map, printed in 1740 by Matthias Suter, one of the most important and prolific German map publishers of the 18th century. It is of Schlaraffenland, which is a land of milk and honey, a map of a German concept of utopia. The original map from which this engraving was made was supposedly dropped off at Mr. Suter's map shop, left right outside of his door, mysteriously just left there with no further information about it. For those interested, I go into more detail about this in my book called Gods with Amnesia. That said, this map is not of any known landmass on the surface of the earth, and has peculiar writing on it, such as saying the light is the same both day and night. I would like to now draw your attention to the bottom right-hand portion of the map, which I found extraordinarily interesting. The writing on it says, in German, and I'll translate, "A utopian map of the newly discovered Schlaraffenland. This land was often spoken of, but never located, and nobody knows where it is. This ridiculous fantasy land is composed of many kingdoms, which have all the different vices of life within them, and that this map was delivered by anonymous authors." Could this so-called fantasy map in actuality be giving us a clue as to the polar entrance to the inner earth, which piqued the interest of nationalist Germany in the early part of the last century? As you can see, the writing is on what appears to be a large rock, or a mountain, with 4 rivers running into it. Does this remind you of the Mercator map? A map originally published in 1570 by Abraham Ortelius of Amsterdam is called the Theatrum Orbis Terrarum, and is considered to be the first true modern atlas. The North Polar Inset map presents a central continent of Hyperborea, or Hyperborea, at the Arctic region. Many of the maps in this atlas were based upon sources that no longer exist or are extremely rare. Gerardus Mercator's maps were among the earliest to display the Arctic as a composition drawn from classical and Nordic sources. Mercator was a cartographer and mathematician born in what is now Belgium. He developed the Mercator projection world map, which is still in use today. Mercator left us his map from the 16th century, the first to offer an image of the Arctic as sourced from a now lost 14th century book, the Itinerarium of Jacob Noyen. Such a large, exposed landmass likely does not exist today as depicted, but remnants of it might. What Mercator and other cartographers of his time were showing, probably unknowingly, was an Arctic landmass that existed there many thousands of years ago in antediluvian times. The back of the map gives insight about this ancient land. Its location is described as, and I quote, "an extreme region of the north, whose apex in the firmament is the North Pole. For this reason, half of the year is one and the same miraculous day, the other half continuous night. There are mountains covered by eternal snows, untouched by the heat of summer, forests without trails, rare animals, and roaring rivers within the abyss of crags." This map not only depicts what could very well be the remnants of Hyperborea, but it also seems to imply that a race of pygmies once heavily populated the northern Canadian and Arctic regions where the 4 rivers intersect. Written on the map, Mercator explains that the ocean waters rush inward towards the center, between the islands to the pole, where they plunge deep into the earth. Directly at the pole is a black island, 33 leagues in circumference. The converging 4 rivers are rumored to be, at least partially, driven by powerful magnetic currents along the Earth's main meridian lines, which circled the entire globe, dividing it into 4 quarters. Could this map be a portion of the inner world? My name is Robert Sepehr. I'm an anthropologist. You can find my published books on Amazon.com. They make a great gift. Thank you so much to those who support me on Patreon. There should be a link below. Kindly share this video if you found it informative. Please hit the like button. Don't forget to subscribe and click on the notification bell for updates. I very much look forward to reading your thoughts in the comment section. Have a wonderful weekend, and I hope to see you again soon.